that's just like the funniest thing ever, right? Only people who were girl assigned at birth qualify. Yes, you found it, Ketanji. But what's funny about this from Ketanji Brown Jackson is like, wait, did she just stumble into the definition of a woman? Did she just discover it? She could not tell you who she is, which is what? A woman. I'm not a biologist. Yeah, I'm not a meteorologist, Ketanji, but I can tell you when it's raining, you doofus. You have eyeballs. What does it say about a nation when our Supreme Court justices cannot tell you what a woman is? Have you seen the viral clip of Ketanji Brown Jackson speaking in the leftist lexicon defending males beating women up in women's sports? SCOTUS is currently arguing over West Virginia's ban and Idaho's ban on men and women's sports. But under the surface, it's much, much deeper than that. The goal has always been to unhinge definitions from words to create a new language, a new lexicon that ushers in a new subjective truth. How do we respond when leaders educated at elite institutions can't define simple terms and concepts? A war against words is a war against truth itself and the world as we know it. This is more than just a hot topic. It's going to set precedents over whether America adheres to the leftist lexicon or to objective truth, to insanity or to common sense. I'm going to dig into this today, and we're going to dive deeper into where this whole belief came from in the war on language and words, because it's actually maybe like one of the most important battles that's happening in our culture war, and it's fundamentally spiritual. It's fundamentally at odds with what it means to be human. And it's at odds with how God made us as rational creatures who can actually understand things about the way that the world is made, the way that the world operates, and come to conclusions from the way that the world operates. The modern left is at war against all of that. And it uses language, okay, and the redefinition of terms in order to accomplish this. It's very important that we dive into all this today. But first, pick up your Gruber Wear merch. The link is in the description. We have a whole merch line now for the Seth Gruber Show. Super fun. Just funny little phrases and things I say. Former fetus, sassy since conception. No, you're a clump of cells. Really fun shirts for you or your family members or as a gag gift for someone you love. And then will you give us a rating and review? We really appreciate it. Make sure if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, you hit the notifications bell and then go subscribe at Rumble, because I get these comments. I was reading some of your guys' comments recently of all these YouTube videos and episodes that you never got notified of. It's funny how that works, huh? So make sure you're subscribed and then subscribe at Rumble to protect this show if the technocratic overlords at YouTube ever get rid of this show again off of YouTube. And then go to iTunes podcast or Spotify and you just hit the 5 stars. We really appreciate that. Join us at the White Rose Resistance. We're a ministry birthed by and for the local church. Localism is the solution to everything. You standing for righteousness and living courageously and speaking out against evil, where you live, all of us doing that simultaneously at the same time, that's what changes a civilization for good. But that's been used for wickedness, of course. And so we establish resistance chapters around the country to get the church mobilized and engaged. But we create media and make movies and curriculum and debates and speeches to inspire people to get involved in what we're doing or in taking charge of themselves, in exercising dominion where the Lord has put them. If that's important to you, that's what we do. And we're one of the only organizations doing that for the Protestant church. If that matters to you, we need your help. Go to thewhiterose.life, sign up at $35 a month. That's an ally. Get your battle box in the mail. Okay, welcome to the war. We're going to equip you with tools, and then join our app, our community with courses and curriculum and live calls and role-playing pro-life, pro-choice to turn you into pro-life ninjas. Or join our Books in the Barracks book club at $70 a month. That's an air support donor at the White Rose Resistance, and we'll read books together, talk about them live on Zoom. Thank you so much. Get all your information at thewhiterose.life. Let's get into it. This is the Seth Gruber Show. Does Ketanji Brown Jackson, the most recently added member of the Supreme Court, know what she is? Does she know what she is? Because the woman who cannot tell you what a woman is might have possibly just stumbled into what a woman is. There are two Supreme Court cases before the High Court this month. Obviously, their decisions usually are not released until about June or the beginning of the summer. And it is all about whether hulking dudes who suddenly discovered a little princess in their heart should be allowed to compete on women's sports teams. Two different cases, both basically the same question. One is called Little versus Hecox. This is from Idaho, and the other is West Virginia versus BPJ out of West Virginia. Okay. The Idaho one, Little, refers to the governor of Idaho, Brad Little, and the state officials defending the law. Excuse me, Lindsay Hecox, I don't know how to say it, is a dude who thinks he's a little girl and wants to run on the girls' track team. In West Virginia, we have a teenage dude who thinks he's a girl, and he's actually being represented by his mother in the court decision. So presumably this mother is actually helping chemically castrate her son. Both cases that went before the Supreme Court in oral arguments and hearings earlier this week are about whether a dude who thinks he's a girl can join female athletic teams at the middle school, high school, and college level. At risk or at question is whether states can ban transgender women and girls, and that, of course, means mentally ill boys who think that they're a little Disney princess inside. Whether states can ban mentally confused men from participating in girls and women's sports, and if such bans are constitutional under federal law. Does a state law that categorically bars mentally confused, gender confused men and girls from girls and women's sports teams, does it violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment? This is how stupid our political discourse has become. Have we reached the peaks of stupidity? The court is considering whether Idaho's law and West Virginia, and by extension similar laws in other states, improperly discriminate on the basis of sex and or transgender status. In regards to the Idaho bill, by the way, in March of 2020, Idaho passed the Fairness to Women's Sports Act, HB 500, and the law states that the athletic teams designated for females, quote, shall not be open to students of the male sex. It's just too good. Lindsay Hecox, a dude attending Boise State University shortly after, challenged the law after it barred him from trying out for the women's track and cross country teams in Idaho. So if these two cases before the Supreme Court are upheld, if the court upholds the Idaho law, it could validate the ability of states to ban transgender girls, boys who think they're girls, and women from girls and women's athletic teams nationwide. If the court strikes it down, it could restrict states' powers to impose such bans and influence how Title IX and equal protection apply to tranny students in sports. So basically, this will determine the future of fairness, justice, equality, and the physical safety of women, of course, who may or may not have volleyballs pummeled into them at 60 miles an hour by a hulking dude giving them concussions, which we recall that actually happening. X, formerly known as Twitter, has been ablaze the last couple days, and it is very entertaining. It's very fun because all of the little mini journalists on X are cutting all of the various hilarious interactions between, the ACLU lawyer representing the, mentally ill, gender confused athlete dude, between Ketanji Jackson and the West Virginia Solicitor General. And it's just too funny. Like, I guess it is an indictment on American culture in this 250th year that sitting Supreme Court justices, ACLU, Harvard Law School graduates, become the new comedians of our culture. They become the ones that entertain us. Frankly, I enjoy it. Yes, there are hilarious comedians, and I really appreciate, a lot of the old school lib kind of comedians who are not conservative by any stretch of the imagination, but they're comedians. It's funny because it's true. And so they joke about true things. And most of the things that are funny to joke about, true things that are funny to laugh at in 2026 are coming from the left side of the political and cultural debate. That's why my buddy Seth Dillon at Babylon Bee is like, the left is putting us out of a job. We can't satirize things that keep coming true. So I often am more entertained by, absolute multiple law degreed, learned ignoramuses kooks like Ketanji Brown Jackson than I am by actual comedians, because it's so true. Therefore, it's so funny. It's not funny to joke about things that are untrue. There's nothing funny about that. Untrue things are things that humans have no experience with. Untrue things that have no basis in reality aren't funny because you can't relate to it. The things that are funny are the things that are true because you can relate to it. So I'm here for it all. I want front row tickets. I want an extra large popcorn with lots of melted butter for these continued Supreme Court oral arguments. So the ACLU, who should be defined as a hate group for how they discriminate against patriots and Christians and conservatives who have a worldview that was basically held by every American and most people for all of human history up until about, when Obama lit the White House in rainbow colors. The ACLU and their various allies in the radical academic left-wing disciplines who make it their priority to try to ruin the livelihoods of students carrying a Bible at school, students wearing a MAGA hat to their public high school, football coaches that want to take a knee to pray or pray with their team, or don't want to bake a cake for a sodomite wedding. The list goes on and on and on. ACLU attorney for Lindsay Dude Hecox, remember the Idaho law that's gone up to the Supreme Court is Little versus Hecox. The ACLU attorney was asked by Samuel Alito what it meant. What does it mean to be a boy or a girl? What does it mean to be a man or a woman? Samuel Alito, not my favorite Supreme Court justice. Obviously, that's Clarence Thomas, but pretty sharp and has had some really interesting, fun, brutal takedowns of retarded ACLU left-wing lawyers before in oral arguments at the high court. But this is very entertaining. We have the video and audio here for you. This is clip one. This is Samuel Alito questioning the ACLU attorney representing the dude who has a little princess living in his soul who wants to run in Disney dresses with his hulking parts dangling around against Boise State female cross-country athletes. This is the ACLU attorney. Play clip.
Is it not necessary for there to be, for equal protection purposes, if that is challenged under the Equal Protection Clause, an understanding of what it means to be a boy or a girl or a man or a woman?
Yes, Your Honor.
And what is that definition? for equal protection purposes. What does it mean to be a boy or a girl or a man or a woman?
Sorry, I misunderstood your question. I think that the underlying enactment, whatever it was, the policy, the law, we'd have to have an understanding of how the state or the government was just understanding that term to figure out whether or not someone was excluded. We do not have a definition for the court. And we don't take issue with we're not disputing the definition here. What we're saying is that the way it applies in practice is to exclude birth-sex males categorically from women's teams, and that there's a subset of those birth-sex males where it doesn't make sense to do so according to the state's own interest.
So what we want to make sure that all people are protected equally under the law. And this whole debate is about that some people have certain genitals and they play sports, but they have to play with people of the same genitals. And then other people, they have different genitals. And so they should play sports with people of the same genitals. So I guess we're talking about men and women. And there's obvious reasons as to why they should play against one another, men playing against other men. And so if we're going to establish the concept and application of equal protection under the law, and the whole debate is about men and women, maybe you could tell us, what does it mean to be a boy or a girl or a man and a woman? And the ACLU attorney says, yeah, we don't have a definition for the court. Yeah, we don't have a definition of that. But then she goes on and says, but we don't take issue. We're not disputing the definition here. What we're saying, what she say is the way it applies in practice. I mean, what applies in practice? The definition. I don't have a definition for the court of what's a boy and what's a girl, but and we're not disputing the definition, but whatever that definition is, which I'm not going to give you, the way that it applies in practice is to exclude birth sex males categorically from women's teams. Right. Yeah, that's right. ACLU, Harvard graduate, Kathleen Hartnett. That's right. The way a word's definition applies in practice is to create distinctions in the world where everything that is not that word should not be treated as if it's actually that word. Wait, isn't that what definitions mean? I'm not going to give it a definition to the court, but the definition that I can't give you, it's being applied in practice that excludes people born with penises from being able to join the female sports team. That's right. Because male actually has a definition. And part of the reason for definitions is distinctions. You see, words are pointers, meaning they actually refer to something, they point to something that actually exists in the real world, right? Language is not endlessly malleable. It reminds me of the I've brought it up on the show before. It's just probably been over a year. I love this scene from Alice in Wonderland, which, like, you guys should all go watch again just because it's like, are we through the looking glass now in 2026? But Alice is talking to Humpty Dumpty, and Humpty Dumpty says, when I use a word, it means precisely what I choose it to mean, neither more nor less. And Alice says, can you really make words mean so many different things? That's all. And Humpty Dumpty says, the question is which is to be master? That's all. Apparently, Humpty Dumpty is saying either we will master language or language will master us. And we'll get into Orwell later, but if language masters us, then we do become slaves, right? Because language shapes the way you think. It filters how you see the world. Language is, almost the front door into politics. Because unless we are speaking the same language and meaning the same things by those words, we cannot communicate. So So words are pointers. They actually say, look, when I say man, okay, I mean Bruce Jenner. So the word man actually refers to something that really exists in the world. But the ACLU attorney says, well, I don't have a definition for what is a man or what is a woman or what's the difference. But whatever that definition is, it's being used in practice to exclude boys who think they're girls from girls' sports. Yeah, that's exactly what a definition does. It creates distinctions and categories. That's the whole point of a definition. So she's just saying that once you have a definition of a word, it necessarily excludes everything else that cannot be defined according to that word. But then she insists we don't have a definition for the court. Then why are we here? What are you doing here? I think Kathleen should go back to Harvard and get her money back. Just, oh my gosh. And this is what we mean, by the way, by learned ignoramuses, right? We've talked before about the elite intelligentsia. You know, those people who believe that in virtue of their smarts, they deserve to rule you, right? You've heard the phrase, the ruling class, or you've heard the phrase, unelected bureaucrats, right? They are the ruling class, right? The Faucis, right? For example, the Francis Collins, right? It's like, I didn't elect those people, but wow, they're sure exercising a lot of political power in regards to how I live my life or how my fellow neighbors can live their life. And you can't just vote those people out. But they were appointed. Why? Because they're really smart. Because they have a bunch of degrees. Because they're experts in their one little silo. Right? And yet, how many people have we seen on the national stage, right? On the political stage, on the entertainment Hollywood stage, okay, who are really, really expert in one thing. And how stupid are those people? Generally speaking, you know, when we were talking about what should we do with this COVID scamdemic, what are we going to do? They just pulled up Fauci and said, follow the science, do whatever he says. Well, why didn't we have a sociologist up there, a historian, a pastor, right? Spiritual care for people in regards to how all of these national changes were going to affect people's spiritual life. You know, you notice it was only the epidemiologists, right? But we're human beings. We're multifaceted. Okay, it's not like we're just little robots. Okay, or cogs in a machine that can just be swapped in and swapped out according to Fauci's wishes. So people who are experts in a little silo like Fauci, right? I'm representing the science. I'm just representing the science. I'm an epidemiologist. It's like sometimes those people are the stupidest people. And that's the problem with ideologies. That's the problem with isms, right? Is that they really force you into one specific carved out ideological lane, and you only know how to think through conflict, decisions, debates, disagreements, varying pieces of information within your one academic silo. So you're a learned ignoramus. Okay. And it's always those types of people who believe that in virtue of their smarts, they deserve to rule. That is your ACLU attorneys, right? And that's certainly Ketanji Brown Jackson, who we'll get to in just a second. Have you seen the books in the children's section at libraries these days? Like even in recent days, when I walked into a library, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is still a problem. It's like gay couples and what do they call trans kids and graphic sex education. My wife has to look over their shoulder the whole time that we go to the library to make sure they don't open up any progressive trash. That's why I love the guys, the folks, the team at Brave Books. One of our kids' middle name is Brave. Come on. They create stories kids actually want to read. But unlike the junk coming out of Hollywood, these stories are intentionally designed to build biblical conviction, moral clarity, and courage from an early age. I mean, courage, that's like the most important virtue. If you don't have that and the next generation doesn't have that, you're going to have a despotic tyrant. They reinforce timeless truths like the sanctity of life, God-given identity, and the fruits of the Spirit through engaging stories, hands-on family activities, and scripture woven into every book. When you join the Brave Book Club, which you should, did you know this? A new book is delivered to your door every month. You don't have to go to the stupid leftist-run feminist-run library downtown. And you also get a free access to Brave Plus. I learned this just when I was hanging out with the Brave guys. Brave Plus is their streaming platform. How dope is that? Filled exclusively with parent-approved content that actually supports a biblical worldview. I think this is a must for all families because you actually want like education and storytelling to be fun, but to actually be virtuous. To have wonder and awe and courage, and Brave Books has brought all that together in a beautiful way. Because if we don't disciple our children, the culture gladly will. And just for my listeners, you can get 20% off your first order today by going to bravebooks.com/Seth. bravebooks.com/Seth and use code Seth. Okay, pretty easy. Okay. You know my name. bravebooks.com/Seth. Use code Seth. Again, that's bravebooks.com/Seth and use code Seth to get 20% off your order when you join Brave Books. I wanted to make this point. I thought this was significant because this whole debacle at the Supreme Court in regards to what is a man, what is a woman, what is a boy, what is a girl, what's the difference, can we even know, is ultimately a war over language. It's a war over words. And it's very interesting when you look at the history of the war on language. Obviously, you see it in most like communist, totalitarian states. You're seeing it right now in the UK. That's certainly the case. They just banned that blonde female conservative influencer who was trying to help the Dutch farmers and all that stuff. What's her name? Eva something. UK just banned her from traveling into the UK. And the new prime minister there is more concerned with deep fake pornography on X than the physical rape of actual women on the streets of London because of Sharia law, radical Islamist jihadists, and the rape culture that's being happened there. It's because they don't like what this Eva girl has to say, right? Her speech. So you see this throughout sort of totalitarian regimes, but it really is shaped into what it is today during the French Revolution. We're going to be diving into all of this later this year. We're almost done with our film, The Last Stand, which I hope you guys come join us for our Last Stand Festival 2026, baby, in Denver on June 5th and 6th, because at the end of the day on Saturday, June 6th, we're going to premiere the worldwide premiere of the Last Stand film. And it's going to be powerful. And we're going to be getting into more of these ideas. But most Christians, most even, kind of your conservative culture warriors, right? Like people like me with a podcast and a decent platform that share ideas. Most people don't understand the significance of the French Revolution to the modern left today. The French Revolution is really the cradle of the modern left. It may not be where leftism was created as we know it today, but it's certainly where it was suckled, where it was fed, and where it was shaped into what it is today. And there's many things that find their origin. There's many things about modern leftism today and how it operates that finds its origin in between the years 1789 and 1797 or something like that. But one of those aspects is the war on language, the redefinition of terms, right? So, call it a transgender woman. No, that's a dude. Right? Trans women are women. No, they're not. Trans women are literally not women. Trans women are quite literally men. Right? Okay. So this whole war on language has been going on for a long time, but it really finds its origin in terms of our modern culture war. During the French Revolution, there were many, many kooky, really wild radical leftists, revolutionaries during the Reign of Terror, led primarily by Robespierre. But one of those has been really forgotten to history in terms of most Christians and conservatives. His name is Restif de la Bretonne. And all these guys were, by the way, like radical youth. That's another thing you get from the French Revolution is the concept of radical youth, like mobilizing the youth to tear down every aspect of Christian culture and burn it all down, and from the ashes to create something new. You think of like the flower children and the hippies, right, as kind of like revolutionary youth movements, but that also starts in the French Revolution. And this guy, Restif, besides coining the term pornographer, coining the term communism, and being an author and collector of literary pornography, shocker, one of the things that he does is he declares war on language. He wants to change the way that people think by changing the meaning of words. And he compiled a list, functionally a dictionary, of words that needed to be reborn, reshaped, made into something more suitable for the modern man. Because the war on language and the redefinition of terms, it's inevitable. Why? Because those definitions, those concepts, the ideas behind the words, the ideas that the words represent, their definitions are too intertwined with Christian ethics, right? So everything has to be reshaped and redefined. Well, that battle is well understood today. We've been seeing that unfold for many years, but that begins in a very real way with this dude named Restif de la Bretonne, who gives us the concept of changing, shifting the understandings, the concepts, and the meanings of words in order to change the way that people think. And Dr. George Grant made the same observation again in 1993 with the publication of his instant bestseller, Grand Illusions, The Legacy of Planned Parenthood, right? He says, he makes the point that there was a time when the word responsible meant reliable, right? Someone who could be trusted to keep his promises, to discharge his duties faithfully. But now, today, in the lexicon of Planned Parenthood, responsibility, that word has been reduced to the tactical use of contraception during immoral sexual encounters. What about the word chastity? It once carried the meaning of purity. Now, according to our culture's revised vocabulary, chastity is merely a phase. It's an adolescent limitation designed to be outgrown. What about the word neutrality? That once implied objectivity, because a neutral person could be expected to weigh evidence, right? Listen carefully, remain open to the truth. But under society's redefinition, neutrality no longer means impartiality, but instead it singles an open-minded moral emptiness, relativism, a refusal to distinguish from right and wrong. What about relationship? That once meant friendship, a bond of mutual regard, loyalty, and affection. But in our decadent culture's altered language, a relationship has been hollowed out and sexualized. Now it just refers to adultery or casual fornication rather than genuine human connection. Okay. So that's a little bit of like the origin of the war on words. And it was birthed, it was created in the shadow of the guillotine. It was manufactured as a strategy of sabotage to tear down the West's understanding of virtue and honor and morality, and the lexicon that was used to express moral virtue and give birth to something new, something for the Rousseauian, agnostic modern man. Life or Death Con is in 1 week. We're so pumped up. We want to see you change our nation. It's all local. You're the solution. But We want to activate you. We want to equip you. We want to mobilize you. It's not too late to join our second annual Life or Death Con in Washington, D.C. next week on January 22nd, 2026. It's a one-day charge to awaken, equip, and send out believers who are ready to make a real difference in the culture. Because for too long, the church has sat on the sidelines, in the distance, on the bench that they're warming while the battle rages. But the tide is turning. Like, people are waking up. I don't know if you see this, but it's incredibly encouraging. And your voice, your courage, and your leadership are essential to what's happening next. We're bringing out the boldest Christian voices, in my opinion, to lead us into this culture war with wisdom and clarity. My brother Steve Dace, our friend Megan Basham, Abby Johnson, Dr. George Grant, Nolene Cedra, AJ Hurley, and more. And then the very next day, march shoulder to shoulder with the White Rose Resistance at the March for Life in Washington, D.C. on January 23rd. Join the hundreds who are already registered and get your ticket at lifeordeathcon.com. Use promo code Seth, my name, SETH, to get 20% off your ticket. We'll see you in Washington, D.C. next week on January 22nd. Well, Ketanji Brown Jackson provides our next entertainment for us. It's pretty hilarious. You recall she was the most recent installed Supreme Court justice, and she clerked under Stephen Breyer, if I'm recalling correctly. And I believe she helped write, because, Supreme Court justices, they have, like clerks, right? And interns who help do some of their writing for decisions. And if I'm remembering correctly, because we did an episode on this years ago, Ketanji Jackson helped write, while clerking for Stephen Breyer, one of those abortion decisions that tried to keep partial birth abortions legal, right? When you stab a baby in the back of the head when their head has been delivered, when their legs have been delivered, but their head is still in the vaginal canal. And then you shove forceps and you create a hole in the back of the neck, and then you suck the brains out while the buttocks and legs have been delivered, but the head is still in the vaginal canal. So this is the kind of woman that Ketanji Jackson is. Well, she is speaking to Michael Williams. He's the West Virginia Solicitor General. Recall, that is the other decision before the Supreme Court right now, West Virginia versus BPJ, looking at this same decision of whether men should be able to participate in women's sports at the high school or collegiate level. Play clip 2.
You have the overarching classification, everybody has to be, play on the team that is the same as their sex at birth. But then you have a gender identity definition that is operating within that, meaning a distinction, meaning that for cisgender girls, they can play consistent with their gender identity. For transgender girls, they can't.
So I think that, okay, so as to the part about your ability to pass over from boy to girl,
yes,
you can go from one way but not the other. I want to be clear that BPJ is not challenging that specific classification. I think that's important to start with. But I think, if anything, that's useful evidence as to the lack of a transgender-based discrimination, because if the legislature were just sort of unsettled by the notion of transgender athletes, I think the answer would have been to then bar them from passing over anyone consistent with their gender.
I appreciate that. I guess I was getting at the what I understood the Chief Justice to be trying to discuss, which was this notion that this is really just about the definition of we accept that you can separate boys and girls, and we are now looking at the definition of a girl, and we're saying only people who were girl assigned at birth qualify.
So, I mean, sometimes when you listen to someone like that talk, you're either like chuckling at yourself, or you're scratching your head. And by the way, if you were scratching your head, that's okay. Okay. Like, people like me have to listen to this stuff and think about this stuff like, basically 5 days a week or 6 days a week. If you just scratched your head at that, like, you're just a normal, like, pretty smart, awesome American, because it's impossible to communicate with people like that, right? Because they're literally speaking a different language. Like, leftism ought to come with a lexicon so that people who are grounded in reality know what the heck they're saying, right? Like she's talking about like, well, cisgender girls get to participate with people of their same gender identity, but transgender girls don't get to. It's not a transgender girl. It's a dude. When someone tells you transgender woman, transgender girl, they're referring to a penis, unless it's been chopped off already, which in some cases that is actually true. They're referring to a dude, to a male, right? And you've seen this unfold for the last, 7 years, 8 years that they've been trying to force Americans to play pronoun patty cake. Don't go along with it, right? This is how language is destroyed. It breaks down our ability to communicate and talk to one another. But worse yet, it begins to change how the public thinks about those issues. When someone says, transgender girls don't get to play with people of their same gender, what they're telling you is your body has no relevance to who you are. You can be trapped in the wrong body. You can have male genitals, but actually there can be a woman hidden inside you. Physical and biological realities have no relationship to identity. Identity becomes severed, okay, from biological and physical realities. So the real person is not a body. That's just a shell, like a vessel, like a Corvette that you drive. Okay, you become a meat puppet. You become a wet robot. The real person is something we cannot see. And when they say gender identity, by the way, that's just the left's way of trying to talk about the concept of the soul, but they don't have the language to express that. Okay. So the soul, this metaphysical self, this identity that I have that I can't see or touch, that's the real me. I wear my body like a skin suit, but it's not the real me. Like, this is ancient paganism. It's like an old Christian heresy. Why should you ever assume that that's the case? By the way, if that is the case, then if a psychiatrist were to cure multiple personality disorder, he'd be guilty of mass homicide and should be pulled in front of a tribunal. And if you didn't get that joke, rewind it and listen to it again. I'm not going to explain it. It's very funny. Okay, so when someone says transgender girl, that's like all that I just said. That's what they're expressing. They're saying that's who people are. That's their view of what it means to be a human being. Why should you accept that? And the language comes prepackaged with metaphysical assumptions. And so when people begin to use that language, right, we'll talk about this at the end of the show. They begin to use that to go along to get along, right? Just to like not be fired if you're in the UK, right? Radical Democrats would love to do that in America too, by the way, fire you for misgendering someone, mispronouncing. And so they just go, they play the pronoun patty cake game, but they don't believe it. They just go along with it. Like, they eventually begin to change too. And so does all of society, which goes to hell in a handbasket because no one has courage. No one's willing to just say, like, the emperor has no clothes. But what's funny about this from Ketanji Brown Jackson is like, wait, did she just stumble into the definition of a woman? Did she just discover it? She's like, we can accept that you can separate boys and girls. And now we're looking at a definition of a girl and we're saying only people who were girl assigned at birth qualify. Yes, you found it, Ketanji. And why is this funny? Because 3 years ago, when she had her confirmation hearings, do you remember this? To go onto the Supreme Court, she couldn't tell us who she is. We have this clip. I want to play it for you. She could not tell you who she is, which is what? A woman. Play clip.
Interpret it. I need to read the whole thing.
Okay. Can you provide a definition for the word woman?
Can I provide a definition? No.
Yeah.
I can't.
You can't?
Not in this context.
So
I'm not a biologist.
The meaning of the word woman is so unclear and controversial that you can't give me a definition?
Senator, in my work as a judge, what I do is I address disputes. If there's a dispute about a definition, people make arguments, and I look at the law and I decide.
Well,
so I'm not.
The fact that you can't give me a straight answer about something as fundamental as what a woman is underscores the dangers of the kind of progressive education that we are hearing about.
So, I told you, learned ignoramuses. I'm not a biologist. Yeah, I'm not a meteorologist, Ketanji, but I can tell you when it's raining, you doofus. Okay, you have eyeballs. You can actually ascertain objective realities about the world from physical and biological realities. It's like, anyways, that's just like the funniest thing ever, right? It's like, here is a woman who is a self-identified feminist. And to be a feminist, which comes from what's the root word? Feminine. I guess feminists would have to believe that women exist. Why be a feminist, which relates to feminine, which relates to female, if you don't believe that your own gender exists? Do you even know you exist, Ketanji? And now you're one of the top lawyers, judges in the entire country. And you don't know what yourself is, but maybe she just stumbled upon it this week, guys. I mean, that's a pretty good definition. Only people who were girl assigned at birth qualify to play in girls' athletics. By the way, I remember when after she was sworn in, Jackie Hill Perry, who's like a real idiot in terms of like a thinker in Christian living, like you shouldn't listen to anything she has to say. You shouldn't read her books anymore. Not only has she praised George Floyd and espoused critical race theory and described all police as systemically racist, but she tweeted out a picture of Ketanji Jackson smiling with her daughter in the background, smiling at her after she got sworn in on the Supreme Court. And she put like, I have a mood. Like she was having a mood. Like she was very emotional, she's crying, very emotional that a black woman who doesn't know if she's a woman is now on the Supreme Court. Anyways, so yeah, the war on language, right? And don't you see this everywhere now, right? Like this whole debacle at the Supreme Court earlier this week, it's just a microcosm, right, of the larger war on truth, which is the war on language. There's been many examples of this just in recent memory, but here's some of them. Like, I just want you to see how this is really everywhere. Like, this is the battle, right? From the phrase gay marriage to the phrase reproductive health care to the phrase trans women are women to the phrase protect trans kids and so many more. It's the war against the universe itself. In her dissent in the Chute Supreme Court case, the case that upheld Michigan voters' decision to prohibit racial preferences, Justice Sonia Sotomayor, right, who might be one of the biggest doofuses to ever be on the Supreme Court, urged that the language of affirmative action, right, that phrase, that it needed to be abandoned in favor of the softer phrase, race-sensitive admissions. Did you know this? Sonia Sotomayor also wanted to redefine concepts, moving it from affirmative action to race-sensitive admissions. But affirmative action itself was already a euphemism, a linguistic veil, masking what were effectively racial quotas in university admissions, right? Like, we want a certain percentage of black people, right? Or Hispanic people or Asian people, right? And so we're going to prioritize that above GPA or academic performance. And then the Supreme Court invalidated them in the B-A-K-K-E case in 1978. And when those quotas became indefensible, the court did not discard racial sorting altogether. Instead, the Bake case supplied new rhetorical refuges by elevating the phrase diversity. It's just diversity, right? To the status of a compelling state interest, and provided a fresh justification for actually continuing to factor race into admission decisions, preserving racial discrimination under a more palatable name. DEI. Well, the SCOTUS DEI hire is not sure what she even is. She was clearly a DEI hire. Not because I say so, but because Biden at the time said so. He said, if I become president, I will add a black woman to the Supreme Court. What's another example? Well, remember the whole phrase sanctuary cities? Do you remember that one? Sanctuary cities. The phrase sanctuary city functions as it's like a polite label for something way worse. It's a polite label for actually the deliberate refusal of state and local governments to enforce federal law, right? When it comes to illegal aliens, right? Such posturing openly defying the constitutional order, which does not permit municipalities or states to selectively disregard federal statutes that they find inconvenient. The selective morality of the term is telling, by the way, because no one would extend the word sanctuary, right? Sanctuary city. No one would extend the word sanctuary to conservative jurisdictions that attempted to shield citizens who ignored federal gun regulations or tax laws or environmental Mother Gaia mandates. So in that light, the language reveals that it's not a principled compassion. It's an ideological camouflage. What's a third example? How about illegal immigration? So a carefully, strategically curated lexicon has developed to soften public perception of foreign nationals who enter and remain in the United States in violation of federal immigration law. The old phrase was illegal alien. Some of you who listen to this show, you're too young to even remember when we used that phrase. Some people still use it. Illegal alien. That was once a straightforward legal designation. One that, by the way, the Supreme Court continues to use, thank God. But this fell out of favor because it conflicted with the aims of the open borders movement. So in response, advocates substituted the vaguer phrase undocumented alien, even though most unlawful entrants never actually possessed immigration papers to begin with. But even that formulation, that linguistic formulation, was not good enough. The word alien, rooted in the Latin alienus, meaning like not of us or of another, right? And has long been used in law, by the way, to denote foreign status. It's, that had to be recast because that was offensive. And therefore it was replaced with undocumented immigrant, a term more useful to the cause and aims of open borders. But today, the intentionally elastic label migrant has now taken center stage. So we've gone from illegal alien to undocumented alien to undocumented immigrant to migrant, a word broad enough to totally erase the legal and moral distinctions between lawful entry, unlawful entry, temporary movement, and permanent residence, suggesting that crossing borders is not a matter of law. It's just a matter of motion. that was a lot of linguistic backflips, right? And of course, everyone thinks of George Orwell, which is appropriate. I mean, he's known for exploring this theme, not just in 1984, a book everyone should go read, but also in his very famous essay, Politics in the English Language. But in 1984, it's a repressive bureaucratic elite who attempt to manipulate the thoughts of men by controlling their language. There you go. And according to this Newspeak, as he calls it in 1984, words like honor, justice, morality, science, and religion cease to exist, while words like war, peace, freedom, slavery, and ignorance have their meanings completely transposed. And remember, according to Orwell in 1984, this is key, okay? What is the purpose of Newspeak? What is the purpose of Newspeak in 1984? Quote, to make all other modes of thought impossible. To make all other modes of thought impossible. Orwell wrote, if thought corrupts language, language can also corrupt thought. Exactly. Because language shapes the way you think. When you start using, here's a great example. Those squishy conservatives who won't call a tranny their new legal name. So they won't call Bruce No, I'm sorry. They won't call a tranny by their pronouns. So these quote unquote conservatives, you meet them all the time. And sometimes Christians, they'll say, I'm not going to call Bruce she, right? I'm not going to call my son she. But names are just legal things. They can be changed. And so if you legally changed your name to Caitlin, I won't call him her, but I'll call him Caitlin. But I'm not capitulating. I'm not bending the knee. I'm not repeating what the party tells me. I'm not thinking what the party tells me to think. I'm just being respectful by using their new legal name, but I understand that it's still a he. Okay. But Caitlin is a girl's name. So even in these little rhetorical choices, you are beginning to change the way you think, whether you know it or not. That's what's so dangerous about political correctness. And when everyone lives that way, by the way, when everyone adopts that strategy, all of society goes to hell in a handbasket. That's why I mock. That's why Ketanji Jackson should be mocked. That's why these people should be laughed at. Because stupid ideas deserve and require to be mocked. Why? Because mockery reawakens moral intuitions, right? What's that? Gosh, I always forget his name. The guy, the original Michael Scott or whatever from the original British Office. Anyways, he's he's like funny because he's not like a full-blown lefty, but he's like definitely a liberal, right? He's not a conservative by any stretch of the imagination. It'll come to me a little bit. And he has this whole comedy bit. I think this was a couple years ago, actually, back when like it wasn't as appropriate to make these jokes, where it's, he's talking about the trannies and he's like, a dude with a penis and he's like his penis. And then like he's pretending that Ricky Gervais, that's right, Ricky Gervais. And he's pretending that it's the trans mob and the trans mob is yelling, it's her penis, not his, and he's making all of these jokes, he's like, wasn't it great back when like, when women didn't have penises, he's like so he's making these jokes and like, he's not a conservative and the whole audience is dying. They're dying. They're just like laughing. Right. But what's crazy about it is like, that's actually how these people operate. It wasn't funny because it was untrue. It was funny because it was true. And yet he had the whole audience dying. But obviously, in a crowd that big, a bunch of those people actually play pronoun patty cake. But when it's put in the context of humor and mockery, even the people who play pronoun patty cake can't help but start laughing and going, oh yeah, that's really stupid. That's why mockery is so important. But first, we want to thank our sponsor, one of our amazing sponsors at the Seth Gruber Show, Every Life Diaper Company. This is amazing. It's like really like the simplest thing ever. Like if you're having babies, you should not fund and help grow pro-abortion, woke, anti-family baby companies and diaper brands who despise you and your values. It's like really that simple. And when our friends at Every Life, who are personal friends, by the way, of my wife and I, so we trust them, and I would encourage you to trust them too, when they discovered that every major baby brand supports abortion, instead of whining about it, they went and built a solution. That's what I love about the people at Every Life. You can get wipes, diapers, baby shampoos, baby lotions, a new line of fem care, and you're supporting a pro-America, pro-life, pro-family company. Everylife.com, promo code Seth10, Seth10 for 10% off your first order, and let them know that we sent you. That's important so that they can see, oh, wow, amazing, the Seth Gruber Show army. Okay, go do that for us, Everylife.com. And then make sure you tell the nursery at your church, the lady who watches the babies, right, the administrator, like, why would a church buy diapers from Huggies or Coterie? They're all pro-abortion. Go to Everylife.com, promo code Seth10 for 10% off your first order. Thank you, Every Life, for sponsoring the Seth Gruber Show. Orwell says the great enemy of clear language is insincerity. When there is a gap between one's real and one's declared aims, one turns, as it were, instinctively to long words and exhausted idioms, like a cuttlefish spurting out ink. In our age, there is no such thing as keeping out of politics. All issues are political issues, and politics itself is a mass of lies, evasions, folly, hatred, and schizophrenia. When the atmosphere is bad, language must suffer. Orwell is saying that when you live in an age of stupidity, the technocratic intelligentsia who have their hands on the reins of political power will soften the language that they use to refer to things that are fundamentally insane, fundamentally stupid, and fundamentally beyond the pale in order to not express the in order to not express the extent to which the issues they support are stupid. They have to soften the language so that the things they're referring to are not expressed rhetorically. That I don't know if that helped, but that's what he's saying. Okay. And this reminds me, to finish out the show today, of perhaps one of the most profound observations I've ever read from Theodore Dalrymple. I think he's a Brit, a psychiatrist, historian, fascinating guy. I think he's still alive. I think he's been on Jordan Peterson, but that was years ago. And this is the takeaway, okay, from Ketanji Jackson, who doesn't know if she is even a woman or not, to those who insist that you call Bruce Jenner her penis, to people who insist that trans women are women, to those who want to see the erasure of women and their liberties and their freedoms and their spaces. This is the takeaway. All of these people are communists. And I mean that quite literally. So Dalrymple says this profound thing. He says, political correctness is communist propaganda writ small. Communist propaganda in a small package is basically what he's saying. And he said, in my study of communist societies, I came to the conclusion that the purpose of communist propaganda was not to persuade or convince, not to inform, but to humiliate. And therefore, the less it corresponded to reality, the better. When people are forced to remain silent, when they are being told the most obvious lies, or worse yet, when they're forced to repeat those lies themselves, they lose once and for all their sense of integrity. To assent, which means to agree, to obvious lies is in some small way to become evil oneself. One's standing to resist anything is thus eroded and even destroyed. A society of emasculated liars is easy to control. And I think if you examine political correctness, it has the same effect and is intended to. It's profound. The purpose of communist propaganda, i.e., political correctness, is not to persuade, convince, or inform, but to humiliate. So therefore, the more that propaganda or language is fanciful, la la land, unicorns and fairies, the more detached it is from reality, the better. Because when normal thinking, rational people, free-born citizens, are asked to agree with lies and eventually to repeat them themselves, they lose all sense of integrity, all sense of courage, all sense of freedom and liberty. And they become little puppets in the hands of despots. And eventually, when you go along to get along for long enough, so you take on the character, you take on the role of the character that you play. Right? Like if you portray or play a character in a theater, in a film for 40 years of your life, you're probably going to actually end up taking on the personality of the character that you've been portraying for 40 years in a way that you would never had if you hadn't been portraying someone else. When you take on the role of a coward and you do it for years, and so does everyone else in society, who can all see that the emperor has no clothes, but no one will freaking say it. Liars are easy to control. Emasculated men are easy to control. That's the purpose of communist propaganda, and it's indistinguishable from political correctness. Thanks for tuning into the show today. Head on over to iTunes, Spotify, YouTube. Give the show a rating and review. We really appreciate it. Really thankful, guys. We're having fun in our book club. You should go to thewhiterose.life. Thewhiterose.life. Join us at the White Rose Resistance. It's the America's 250th, right? 250th. But I'm all about wearing wife beaters in red, white, and blue. And, shooting tannerite clay targets out of the air to celebrate America. But having an America party while the Republican Party is declaring its commitment to gay marriage, gay surrogacy, and 600,000 babies flushed down the American sewage system with the abortion pill is to invite the wrath of God. So if the foundations be destroyed, what can the righteous do? Localism will be the answer when you, where God has put you, decide to say the emperor has no clothes and start restoring righteousness to where you live. That's why when you join the White Rose Resistance at $35 a month as an ally, you get a battle box in the mail, join our app with courses, curriculum, live calls, or at $70 a month at thewhiterose.life. Join our air support tier. And you join our Books in the Barracks book club. Right now we're reading Our Civilizational Moment by Os Guinness. Os Guinness, the great-great-great-grandson of the Dublin brewer, Guinness beer. Os Guinness was shaped under the ministry of Francis Schaeffer. He's in his 80s. He's still alive today, and he's speaking at The Last Stand on June 6th in Denver. Go to thelaststand.com to get your tickets, but go to thewhiterose.life and join us as a monthly partner if you want to see more Christian resistance and iconoclasts tearing down the high places like Gideon locally around America. Go support the White Rose Resistance. We're getting the church off her hiney. Go subscribe to YouTube and Rumble to protect this show, because YouTube has come for this show before. Until next time, I'm Seth Gruber, and this is The Seth Gruber Show.